My dad begged me to come home for the holidays. After a 10-hour flight, he told me to watch the kids while they left. Everyone laughed. I smiled and said one thing. I'm glad you're here. I'm telling this calmly because that's how it happened, quietly, in plain sight, with receipts and timestamps. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry in front of them. I listened. And I wrote everything down. The sentence that changed everything came an hour after I landed. Just for a couple of days. That was the phrase. Said lightly. Repeated often. Logged in my notes app at 8:14 p.m. local time, December 21st. I didn't understand it then, but that sentence followed me through the whole week. I flew home because my dad asked me to. He called twice in one day, which he never does. First at 6:02 a.m. my time. Then again at 9:47 a.m. He said he missed me. He said the holidays weren't the same without me. He said, come home. I'll cover the flight. I hadn't been home in 11 months. Work had been steady but heavy. Project deadlines, late nights, the kind of tired that feels clean because you earned it. I booked the flight during my lunch break. $1,143.27. Economy plus. 10 hours door to door, including the layover. I forwarded the confirmation to my dad at 12:31 p.m. He replied with a thumbs up. I arrived on a Friday. The house looked the same from the curb. Same wreath on the door, same cracked step near the driveway. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and cleaning spray. My sister was there with her 2 kids. My brother and his wife arrived 20 minutes later with theirs. 4 kids total. Ages 2 to 7. Loud. Sticky. Happy. Everyone hugged me. My dad hugged me last. We ate early. Pizza boxes on the counter. Paper plates. Someone poured wine. Someone laughed about how long my flight was. I remember checking my phone because my legs still felt like they were moving. At 7:52 p.m., my dad cleared his throat. He said my name the way he does when he wants agreement. Not a question. A setup. We're heading out tomorrow morning, he said. Just overnight. Maybe 2. There was a pause. A soft one. The kind that passes if you don't catch it. You'll watch the kids, he added. You're so good with them. My sister laughed. My brother's wife smiled and said, you're a lifesaver. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how casual it was. No asking. No checking my plans. No mention of the flight home I had already booked for the 27th. No discussion of schedules, food, bedtime, allergies. Just an assumption, set down like a glass on the table. I smiled. I nodded once. Then I said the one thing I had rehearsed on the plane, without knowing why I was rehearsing it. Sure, I said. Send me the details. There was a flicker on my dad's face. It lasted maybe half a second. What details? He asked. Dates, I said. Times. Flights. Hotel. He waved his hand. It's all flexible. That was the second phrase. Logged at 8:19 p.m. It's family, my sister said. You should be grateful. I smiled again. Later that night, after the kids were asleep and the house went quiet, I heard my dad in the hallway. He didn't know I was awake. He was whispering into his phone. No, he said. No way. I didn't understand it then. But I opened my notes app and typed the time. And that's where this really begins. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if stories like this stay with you, please like and subscribe. It really helps me keep sharing the truths I've carried for years. I lived 3 states away then. A 1-bedroom apartment with a narrow balcony and a view of another building's brick wall. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I worked as a project coordinator for a logistics firm. Spreadsheets, timelines, contracts, invoices. Quiet competence. The kind of job where mistakes show up months later, so you learn to be careful. I'd always been the careful one in my family. If something needed organizing, it landed with me. Holidays. Travel plans. School forms. Emergency contacts. When my sister forgot to register her kids for summer camp, I fixed it. When my brother needed help disputing a credit card charge, I walked him through it step by step. No one asked how I learned those things. They just assumed I would know. At home, that pattern had been set early. My mom died when I was 19. After that, the house ran on habit and silence. My dad worked. My sister had kids young. My brother floated. I filled the gaps without naming them. So when my dad called and asked me to come home for the holidays, it didn't feel suspicious. It felt overdue. The morning after I arrived, I woke up before everyone else. Jet lag does that to me. I made coffee at 6:11 a.m. The kitchen was still dark, the only sound the refrigerator humming. I checked my phone. No messages. No itinerary. No forwarded emails. At 6:23 a.m., my dad came in wearing his jacket. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied. "What time are you leaving?" He poured coffee without answering. Took a sip. Set the mug down. "Late morning," he said finally. "Depends." "Depends on what?" He shrugged. "Traffic." That was the first red flag. Small. Almost polite. By 7 a.m., the kids were awake. Cartoons on. Crumbs everywhere. My sister started packing a bag. Snacks, pajamas, stuffed animals. She handed it to me without comment. I took it automatically, then paused. "How long exactly?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "Just a couple nights." That phrase again. My brother walked in scrolling his phone. "You're the best," he said. "We owe you." I smiled. I always smiled then. It kept things smooth. By 8:40 a.m., the adults were dressed. Shoes on. Coats zipped. My dad stood by the door, keys in hand. "Flights?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He hesitated. "We're driving." "Where?" He opened the door. Cold air rushed in. "It's all flexible." There it was again. At 9:02 a.m. they left. All 4 adults. 2 cars. No printed schedules. No emergency numbers beyond what I already had memorized. The kids waved from the window. Someone shouted thank you. The door closed. The house went quiet in a way that felt different from the night before. I stood there for a full minute, listening to the echo of engines pulling away. I didn't panic. I didn't feel angry yet. I did what I always did. I took control. I wrote down the time. I checked the fridge. I made a list. Meals, naps, bedtime, medications. I texted my dad at 9:14 a.m. "Can you send the address where you'll be staying?" No reply. At 10:37 a.m., I texted again. "Just in case of emergency." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. At noon, I received a single message. "Relax. We've got it handled." I didn't understand it then, but something in my chest tightened when I read that. Not fear. Not anger. Calculation. Because for the first time, I realized no one had told me. The first day passed the way long days with children usually do. Slow, loud, full of small negotiations. Snacks. Shoes. Tears over the wrong cup. I moved through it on autopilot. I set timers. I counted diapers. I wrote down nap times like data points. At 6:18 p.m., after the youngest finally fell asleep on my shoulder, my phone buzzed. It was a bank alert. I almost ignored it. I usually did. But the preview showed my dad's name, and that pulled my attention the way numbers always do. $3,200 pending transfer. Sender dad. Memo. Reimbursement. I stared at it longer than I should have. Reimbursement for what? I hadn't paid for anything yet. No groceries. No supplies. No emergency runs. The kids had eaten what was in the house. I hadn't touched my wallet. I opened my banking app. The transfer was real. Scheduled for the next business day. That was the first crack. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't call. I took a screenshot at 6:21 p.m. and saved it to a folder I labeled Holidays. That night, after bedtime stories and lights out, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The house Wi-Fi connected automatically. Same password it's always been. I checked my email. Nothing from my dad. Nothing from my siblings. At 9:44 p.m., I texted my dad again. Just checking in. Kids are asleep. What time are you coming back tomorrow? The reply came at 11:02 p.m. Still figuring it out. That was the second crack. The next morning, December 22nd, I woke up to another notification. $3,200 completed. I refreshed the screen. The money was in my account. I sat on the edge of the bed and did the math automatically. $3,200 wasn't a casual amount. It wasn't gas money. It wasn't groceries. It was specific. I searched my inbox for the word reimbursement. Nothing. I didn't understand it then, but that money wasn't payment. It was leverage. At breakfast, the kids asked when their parents were coming back. I said soon because it was easier than explaining uncertainty to people who still trusted adults completely. At 10:13 a.m., my sister called. Her voice was bright, rehearsed. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "When are you back?" A pause. "Just a fraction. Probably tomorrow night," she said. "Why?" "No reason," I replied. "Just planning." "You're so organized," she laughed. "We're lucky to have you." That line stuck. After lunch, while the kids colored at the table, I checked my calendar. My return flight was scheduled for December 27th at 7:45 a.m. non-refundable. $1,143.27. I'd booked time off work through the 28th. I had commitments waiting for me back home. At 2:46 p.m., another message came through from my dad. "Can you grab some groceries?" Use what I sent. That was the moment things shifted. I stood in the kitchen holding my phone, reading it twice. The tone wasn't a request. It was an instruction, backed by money already in my account. I didn't reply right away. I took another screenshot. At the store, I spent $184.62. Basics. Milk. Fruit. Pasta. Nothing extravagant. I kept the receipt and took a photo of it on the counter when I got back. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat down with my laptop again. I searched for flights leaving earlier than the 27th. Prices had doubled, tripling in some cases. I searched for hotels near my dad's phone location, not exact, just the general area the carrier suggested. That's when I noticed something else. My dad's location services were off. They'd always been on. I didn't understand it then, but that small setting change told me more than any message could. Because people don't turn things off when they're relaxed. They turn them off when they don't want to be found. And that was when I realized this wasn't about helping. It was about control. I slept lightly that night. The kind of sleep where your mind keeps working even when your eyes are closed. I woke up at 4:58 a.m. and checked my phone without thinking. No messages. No missed calls. I didn't get out of bed right away. I opened my banking app again. There was a new note attached to the transfer. Childcare support. Dated December 21st, added sometime after midnight. I stared at it until my eyes burned. That label hadn't been there before. I was certain of it. I had taken the screenshot the night before. I compared them side by side. Same amount. Same sender. Different memo. That was the moment my chest went hollow. Because reimbursement could be sloppy. Childcare support was deliberate. At 5:12 a.m., I emailed myself the screenshots. Then I forwarded them to a private folder in my cloud storage. I named it Receipts. I didn't feel dramatic doing it. I felt methodical. By 7 a.m., the kids were awake again. Breakfast. Spilled juice. A small argument over socks. I moved through it calmly, but something in me had shifted. I was watching everything now. Tone. Timing. Word choice. At 9:18 a.m., my dad called. "Morning," he said, too cheerful. "Morning," I replied. "Everything good?" he asked. "Yes," I said. I noticed the transfer. A pause. "It's just paperwork," he said. "Don't overthink it." That line landed hard. It's just paperwork. I wrote it down after the call ended. Word for word. Why did the memo change? I asked before he could redirect. Another pause. Longer this time. "Bank stuff," he said. "You know how it is." I did know how it was. That's why my stomach dropped. At 11:34 a.m., I received an email from my sister. Subject line, "Quick thing." She wrote that they might need to extend their trip a bit. That it depended on how things went. She thanked me again. She added, "Dad's helping you out, so it's fair." Fair. At 12:02 p.m., I searched my email for my name combined with the word care. That's when I found it. A forwarded message chain from 3 weeks earlier. Sent to my dad. Then to my sister. Then to my brother. My name was in the subject line. Holiday childcare coverage, Plan B. I opened it slowly. They had discussed dates. December 21st to December 26th. 5 full days. Overnight care. School closures accounted for. Meal budgets estimated. $3,200 listed as standard rate. Standard. My name appeared 6 times in the thread. I hadn't been included once. I felt cold then. Not shocked. Not angry. Just cold. At the bottom of the thread, my dad had written one line. She won't say no. That was the lowest point. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my hands flat on the surface. The house was loud around me, but I barely heard it. My heart wasn't racing. It felt heavy, like something had settled permanently. At 12:47 p.m., I checked my work email. A message from my manager asking if I could join a call on the 27th. I replied yes automatically, then stared at the confirmation. At 1:10 p.m., I checked flight prices again. My return ticket was still there. Still non-refundable. Still mine. At 2:03 p.m., I opened my notes app and started a timeline. Calls. Messages. Transfers. Amounts. Dates. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront anyone. I understood something then that I hadn't before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't last minute. And it wasn't gratitude. I didn't feel panicked. I felt organized. The first thing I did was stop improvising. Improvisation had gotten me here. I opened my notes app and created a new list titled Next 48 Hours. I wrote in short lines, no emotion. Confirm custody status. Document consent. Secure return flight. Control narrative. 40% planning. I could feel that part of my brain click on. At 10:56 p.m., I texted my dad. I need the exact return date and location tonight. No emojis. No softening. At 11:19 p.m., he replied. Why are you being like this? That was answer enough. At 11:27 p.m., I emailed my manager and explained in 2 sentences that a family situation had shifted and I might need flexibility on the 27th. I attached no drama. Just facts. She replied 6 minutes later with, do what you need to do. We've got you. I wrote that down too. Not everything bad needs to be balanced. Some things just need to be noticed. At 11:43 p.m., I called the airline. The hold time was 42 minutes. I waited. I paid $487.90 to change my return flight to the 24th at 6:05 a.m. I used my credit card, not the money my dad sent. That mattered. At 12:38 a.m., I emailed myself the updated itinerary and added it to the folder. Then I slept. The next morning, December 23rd, I woke up with a plan and a strange sense of calm. The kids ate breakfast. I packed lunches. I kept everything normal on the surface. Inside, I was measuring. At 9:12 a.m., I sent a group text. Please send written confirmation that I am not a legal guardian and that you will return by December 24th. No accusations. No context. Just a request. My sister replied first. You're overthinking this. My brother added, we never asked you to help. I screenshotted both. At 9:47 a.m., my dad called. I didn't answer. At 10:03 a.m., he texted. Family doesn't do this. That line went straight into my notes. At 11:18 a.m., I contacted a family law hotline in my state. Not to escalate. To understand. The woman on the line asked careful questions. Dates. Ages. consent. Payment. When I mentioned the transfer labeled childcare support, she paused. That implies an agreement, she said. Even if I never accepted it? I asked. Especially then, she replied. That was the emotional reflection part. 30%. Short. Sharp. I thought about how many times I'd been described as helpful. How often that word replaced consent. How easily responsibility slid into expectation. By early afternoon, the resolve had settled in. At 2:22 p.m., I sent one final message. I will be leaving at 4:30 a.m. tomorrow. Please arrange to be home by then. There was no immediate reply. At 3:09 p.m., my dad called again. I let it ring. At 3:47 p.m., a message came through. We'll talk when we get back. I stared at the screen. They still thought there was time. They still thought I would wait. I closed my phone and started packing. Because the next thing that happened would not be a conversation. It would be an action. And once it happened, there would be no undoing it. I woke up at 3:58 a.m. to my alarm, already dressed. The house was dark. Quiet in that brittle pre-dawn way. I moved through it without turning on lights, checking rooms by memory. For kids asleep. Bags packed by the door. Notes on the counter with instructions, allergies, morning routines. I wasn't careless. I was precise. At 4:12 a.m., I sent one message to the family group chat. I'm leaving now. Nothing else. At 4:18 a.m., my phone rang. Dad. I let it ring. At 4:22 a.m., another call. Then another. Texts started stacking. Where are you going? This isn't funny. Answer your phone. I put my phone face down and finished my coffee. At 4:31 a.m., I called the non-emergency number. Not 911. I was careful about that too. I explained the situation calmly. Names. Ages. Dates. That I had been left without a return time. That payment had been sent without consent. That I was not a legal guardian. That I was about to leave for a scheduled flight. The officer didn't interrupt me. At 4:44 a.m., he asked one question. Do you have written proof you asked them to return? Yes, I said. Do you have proof they refused? Yes. Stay where you are, he said. We're sending someone. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. At 5:03 a.m., the first patrol car pulled up. Lights off. No drama. The officer knocked softly. I showed him everything. The screenshots. The transfer memo. The email thread titled Holiday Childcare Coverage, Plan B. The line that said, she won't say no. He read quietly. His jaw tightened once. That was the only reaction. At 5:21 a.m., my dad called again. I answered this time and put him on speaker. Where are you? He demanded. In the house, I said. With an officer. Silence. What? He said. I asked you to come back, I continued calm. You didn't. I'm leaving. This is being documented. He lowered his voice. You didn't have to do this. That was the moment. The power reversal. I did, I said. You made sure of that. The officer took the phone and spoke to him directly. Short sentences. Clear consequences. At 5:36 a.m., my sister started texting rapidly. You're blowing this up. We trusted you. You're ruining Christmas. I didn't respond. At 5:48 a.m., my brother called. I declined. At 6:02 a.m., the second patrol car arrived. Protocol. Paperwork. At 6:19 a.m., my dad texted. We're on our way. I wrote the time down. They arrived at 7:11 a.m. 2 cars. Disheveled. Quiet. No one hugged me. The officer reviewed custody handoff verbally. Names confirmed. Times logged. The kids were transferred back without tears. They were used to adults rearranging things without explanation. At 7:28 a.m., my dad tried to speak to me privately. The officer shook his head. Not right now. That was the irreversible action. A report was filed. Not charges. Documentation. I grabbed my bag at 7:34 a.m. As I walked out, my dad whispered it. No way. I didn't look back. At 7:45 a.m., I was in the back of a rideshare headed to the airport. My phone buzzed once more. A message from my dad. You didn't have to embarrass us. I took a screenshot. Because embarrassment wasn't what happened. Exposure was. And once it happened, there was no closing that door again. The airport was already loud when I arrived. Rolling suitcases. Holiday announcements. The smell of burnt coffee. It felt strangely comforting, anonymous, procedural, indifferent. I checked in at 8:02 a.m. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything else. While I waited at the gate, my phone stayed silent for almost an hour. No calls. No messages. The silence felt intentional, like everyone had agreed to stop talking at once. Then, at 9:11 a.m., the messages started again. My sister first. You could have just talked to us. I didn't reply. My brother followed. We never said you couldn't leave. That one I read twice. At 9:24 a.m., my dad sent a longer message. No yelling. No apologies. Just exhaustion pressed into text. You made us look bad. The kids were confused. People talk. I hope it was worth it. I closed my phone and boarded the plane. The flight home was uneventful. 4 hours in the air. I watched half a movie and didn't register any of it. I kept replaying small details instead. The officer's tone. The exact moment my dad realized he couldn't manage the situation anymore. The way no one had asked if I was okay. I landed at 1:36 p.m. local time. The air felt different, colder, sharper. My apartment was exactly how I'd left it. Quiet. Undisturbed. That night, I slept deeply for the first time all week. The consequences didn't come all at once. They arrived in pieces. 3 days later, my sister posted a photo online. The kids around a tree. Caption: Family is everything. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. A week after that, my brother Venmo'd me $184.62. The exact grocery amount. No note. My dad didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. When he finally did, it was a voicemail. 38 seconds long. He said he didn't understand why I'd gone that far. He said I embarrassed him. He said he'd done a lot for me over the years. He never said I'm sorry. I noticed who stayed quiet too. An aunt who had always praised me for being reliable. A cousin who once told me I was the glue. They didn't call. They didn't text. It wasn't dramatic. It was just absence. And then there were the changes that didn't announce themselves. I stopped answering vague requests. I stopped filling in blanks that weren't mine. I stopped translating other people's convenience into my responsibility. At work, I said no to a last-minute project and watched nothing fall apart. At home, I took my phone off silent and realized how rarely it rang. In early February, my dad sent me one more message. We're hiring help next time. I read it slowly. I didn't reply, because that sentence wasn't for me. It was for him. A quiet admission that something had broken and couldn't be patched with money or assumptions anymore. What I lost wasn't just access. It was the illusion that love and obligation were the same thing. What changed was simpler. I went back to being a daughter. Not a solution. Not a contingency plan. Not a line item labeled standard rate. And the people who couldn't accept that adjustment made their choice clear without saying another word. By the time spring arrived, the house I grew up in felt like a place I used to know. And I was finally okay with that. When things finally went quiet, I noticed how much space silence actually holds. Not empty space. Honest space. Weeks passed without emergencies. Without last-minute favors disguised as love. Without the familiar pressure of being the responsible one. At first, that absence felt strange. Like I'd forgotten to do something important. Then I realized what I was feeling wasn't guilt. It was relief. I thought a lot about the version of myself who booked that flight so quickly. Who heard "come home" and translated it into obligation. Who believed that being needed was the same as being valued. I didn't blame her. She was operating on old rules. Rules that had kept the peace for a long time. Rules that rewarded silence and punished boundaries. What surprised me wasn't my family's reaction. It was how predictable it all became once I stepped out of my assigned role. No one asked how the situation had felt for me. No one acknowledged the planning behind it. No one questioned why assumptions had replaced consent. Instead, the focus stayed on optics. On embarrassment. On how uncomfortable it was for them to be seen. That told me everything I needed to know. I replayed that moment in the kitchen often, the one where my dad said, "It's just paperwork." Because paperwork isn't just paper. It's intent. It's structure. It's proof that someone thought this through long before I ever landed. I didn't explode. I didn't threaten. I didn't demand apologies. I simply stopped cooperating with a story that wasn't true. And that's what changed the power dynamic. Not anger. Not confrontation. Not punishment. Clarity. I learned that composure is threatening to people who rely on confusion. That calm questions expose plans faster than raised voices ever could. And that saying nothing until you're ready to act is sometimes the strongest position you can take. I still love my family. That didn't disappear. But love doesn't require self-erasure. And support doesn't mean surrender. The version of me who walked out that morning didn't do it to teach a lesson. She did it to protect herself. The lesson was simply unavoidable. If you're listening to this and something in it feels familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. Being dependable does not make you disposable. And the moment you stop filling a role that benefits others unfairly, the truth tends to surface on its own. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. Moral: boundaries don't break families. Unspoken entitlement does.